Tonight, we revisit a case that has stayed with the American public for 3 decades. A case that blends tragedy, fame, legal complexity, and unresolved emotion. And even today, one question continues to echo across generations. How could one of the most famous men in the country walk out of a criminal courtroom a free man, yet remain bound by a massive civil judgment for the rest of his life? To understand this story, we must return to a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood in June of 1994, when Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were found brutally murdered outside Nicole's home. Their deaths shocked the city. Nicole was a young mother rebuilding her life, and Ron was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, returning a pair of glasses left at a restaurant. The scene drew immediate attention from investigators, the media, and soon the entire world. O.J. Simpson, a household name in America, a celebrated athlete and entertainer, found himself at the center of the investigation. His relationship with Nicole had been troubled, with a documented history of conflict. From the moment police questioned him, the case spiraled into one of the most polarizing chapters in American legal history. Only days after the murders, Simpson was expected to turn himself in. Instead, the nation watched in disbelief as a white Ford Bronco crossed the freeway at a slow crawl, followed by a convoy of police cars. Millions witnessed the moment live, a surreal fusion of tragedy and spectacle. By the end of that night, Simpson was taken into custody, and the criminal trial that followed became the most watched courtroom drama of the century. In 1995, after months of testimony, arguments, and intense public scrutiny, the jury returned a verdict: not guilty. The courtroom fell into silence, then erupted with reactions that reflected a deeply divided nation. For some, the verdict was a vindication of the principle that guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. For others, it felt like a devastating miscarriage of justice. But the story did not end there. The families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman sought accountability through the civil courts, where the burden of proof is different. In that setting, a jury found Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths and ordered him to pay substantial damages. This ruling was grounded in evidence that convinced the civil jury he was responsible, even though the criminal case had required a higher level of certainty. From that moment forward, Simpson owed millions, over $100 million when interest was added. Yet collecting that judgment would prove nearly impossible. Under U.S. law, certain assets are shielded from civil collection. One of the most significant is pension income, including retirement funds earned during a career in professional sports. For Simpson, this pension became his primary source of financial stability. Legally, it could not be seized to satisfy the civil judgment. That meant year after year, he continued to receive steady income, while the families received only a small fraction of what the court had ruled they were owed. This aspect of the case created ongoing frustration for many observers. How, they wondered, could someone found civilly responsible for 2 deaths continue to live comfortably for decades? But the laws that protect pensions were not written for the wealthy or for high-profile figures. They were designed to prevent ordinary people from losing everything in lawsuits, to ensure that retirees could still afford a basic life even after facing legal or financial hardship. The unintended consequence was that these protections also applied to Simpson. For the Goldman and Brown families, the civil judgment represented more than money. It represented accountability. It represented a form of justice the criminal courts had not given them. And so for many years, they continued to pursue whatever portion of the judgment the law allowed them to collect. At times, they succeeded in claiming rights to certain literary or commercial properties associated with Simpson. At other times, the process stalled because his income remained largely unreachable. Meanwhile, Simpson's life after the trials was marked by a complicated blend of public appearances, attempts to rebuild his image, and later new legal troubles unrelated to the 1994 case. In Nevada, he was convicted for armed robbery in 2008 and served time in prison before being released on parole. Yet even during that period, the civil judgment remained outstanding. When Simpson passed away in 2024, he still owed the majority of that debt. His death reopened questions about what, if anything, the families might recover from his estate. Legal experts note that if the estate contains assets not protected by law, the families may be entitled to claim them. However, if protected funds were his primary source of income, The remaining amount could be limited. This continuing uncertainty reflects the broader tension embedded in this case, a conflict between legal structure, public perception, and emotional truth. The story of O.J. Simpson is not just about one man's trials. It is about a nation wrestling with the boundaries of the justice system. It is about the difference between what can be proven in a courtroom and what many believe in their hearts. It is about the weight carried by survivors who lost loved ones in a violent crime. And it is about how fame, wealth, and legal protections can intersect in ways that ordinary citizens rarely experience. It also raises deeper questions about the nature of justice itself. When the law says not guilty, but a civil court says liable, where does that leave the families seeking closure? When the system protects retirement income for the sake of society, what happens when those protections prevent victims' families from receiving the compensation a jury awarded? These issues are complex, layered, and often painful to confront. The impact of the case extends even further. It shaped the way Americans view high-profile trials. It fueled discussions about race, privilege, policing, and media influence. It forced people to examine their own assumptions about guilt, innocence, and fairness. And decades later, it still has the power to stir emotion and spark debate. For the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, no courtroom outcome, criminal or civil, can restore what was taken from them. Their loss remains permanent. Their pursuit of justice has lasted nearly a lifetime. And even today, they continue to carry the weight of that night in 1994. As we reflect on this case, one thing becomes clear. The story is not simply legal history. It is a window into the human experience of grief, frustration, determination, and resilience. It reminds us that behind every headline are families, memories, and a lifetime of unanswered questions. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can uncover more stories together. This content is compiled and analyzed based on publicly available information and open discussions.